Guys, I'm so happy ADCC made this illegal because, man, Gianni could have really gotten injured and it's just not safe, you know? You risk a lot going out to these tournaments and to have someone spike you on your head like that. So good call on the ADCC.
I'm having a lot of people say that Gianni deserved to be spiked on his head because he ripped a heel hook. And I think that's like a really bad equivocation. Like, the worst case scenario of ripping a heel hook, even if you're like a total asshole about it, right, is you break their leg, which sucks. And a broken leg in that case is going to mean surgical intervention, which means you're out of training for a year. But the prognosis for like surgical intervention with like for knee injuries is very good. The likelihood is you're going to be able to continue on as an athlete as long as you do all the right things after you rehab, right? Getting fucking spiked on your head like that could kill you or like cripple you permanently for life, which I'm not an expert on spine surgery, but I would guess that there's very little that can be done if you're like crippled like that. So I do not see these two things as being in any way like equal. As a general rule, combat sports are always going to be really dangerous, right? Just kind of like the nature of the beast. I don't think we should try to remove all danger from combat sports because we would be essentially neutering, the art if we did that. But I think that we should work to make sure that while we're not removing all danger, we're removing risk of fucking death, right? Like there's something like substantively distinct from breaking your arm or your leg from like fucking dying, right? So like that's what I think we should focus on. It's not about superficially, it's like, well, they look similar, right? They're two very dangerous things that are happening. I agree, fucking your leg up is that sucks, bro, but it's not comparable to like dying or being unable to walk ever again. Oftentimes people will look at joint locks that are like superficially really, really nasty looking and like overstate how gruesome the damage from them even is. So for instance, in the case of that heel hook that Gianni ripped, his opponent actually competed like 2 weeks after that. Like he was fine. Like he wasn't injured from that heel hook. I put up a video of a back triangle where I had a pretty tight arm lock on my opponent and people were like, oh dude, he definitely got injured, and he didn't. He was fine. Like people will look at joint locks and think to themselves, oh wow, there's definitely an injury that occurred there. Our joints are honestly way more robust than people oftentimes give them credit for. The worst joint injuries typically occur from accidents. So like falling body weight on a knee, for instance, what you might observe, like how an NFL player typically tears his ACL, or like a soccer player or any other like, pivoting sports. And a decent amount of time reading about like the mechanism of injury with regards to like ACL tears, especially when I was looking at a lot of like I watched videos of NFL players, and then I looked up like medical journal articles about the mechanism of injury in ACL injuries in those sports, and then I tried to like reverse engineer that when it comes to heel hooks. And the conclusion that I ultimately came to is that it's very difficult for like us to recreate those forces like in a reliable way that we can like proactively recreate, right? Like the mechanism of injury of an ACL tear in a pivoting sport, right, where you're pivoting on your legs, is always going to be substantially worse than anything we can do statically in like a double seated situation with a heel hook, because we just can't replicate that same level of I'm sure there's like a specific physics term for this, I just don't know it, like the body weight crashing into someone's knee, right? Or even like, so oftentimes you'll see NFL players will tear their ACLs, they'll pivot, the foot will stay planted, and then they'll turn and the foot stays planted. Like that is such a powerful force going into the knee. It's so hard to replicate that with a heel hook. Now, what we can do, okay, is we can have very precise braking mechanics, which are like a facsimile of that mechanism of injury, right? It's as close as we probably can get it. But dude, you would be shocked, I think, at how hard it is to actually really effectively completely tear an ACL in a way that genuinely replicates that mechanism of injury. people talk all the time about breaks, right? Well, let's understand that breaks come in different degrees, right? I try not to think of breaks, or at least this is something recently I've been thinking about, in terms of like devastating breaks or like superficial breaks, right? I'm trying to think in terms of the completeness of the break, because I think that's a more precise way to think about it. Like devastating, it's a bit of an arbitrary and vague term, right? You say what could be devastating to one person might not be devastating to another person. So I'm trying to think about it in terms of, okay, have we completely severed the ligament that we're attacking, right? And we want to be able to use mechanics which reliably and consistently do that. And yeah, I mean, it's a lot harder to do that than you'd actually think, even when it looks like super, super gruesome. Anyway, the whole point of this rant is just that, like, I'm just trying to make the case that, like, don't just look at a video of a joint lock and assume that something really bad happened because it looked nasty. It's much more complicated than that. You know, in the case of that match, I don't think Gianni did literally anything wrong. However, if we're crashing body weight forward in a way that could potentially spike your head on the floor, and if someone knows more about this, like in terms of like anatomy, feel free to correct me, but I'm pretty sure that could fucking kill someone. That's way worse. And so, yeah, I and ADCC agrees with me. You know what I mean? They fucking banned it. Thank God. So, yeah. Common response you'll hear to the types of things that I'm saying is that, oh, you're a pussy, bro. You want people to not die in jiu-jitsu matches? Damn, you're such a pussy. That's an admission of defeat. You have absolutely no argument.
Back flat to mat. Protect your neck. Sterling, use your left hand to peel that exact.